Hi everyone. If you have been struggling with comprehension and want to learn how to do comprehension passages, this video is for you. I have included the strategies and tips that will help you to do them well. And I have 2 comprehension passages with questions for you to attempt after you have learned how to do comprehensions well. I will give you the answers too, so that you can check to see if your answers are correct. So do keep a pen and paper with you before we begin. Let's start. Comprehension basically means understanding. So when you are given a comprehension passage, the teacher wants to know how well you can understand what is in it. So what should you do to show that you understand it? Well, read the text. Read it very well. Read it carefully. The only way that you can ensure that you will understand what is in that passage is to read it carefully. Process it. Think about it as you read it. Don't just read it for the sake of reading it. Process the whole passage. Understand it. Try to imagine the events. And then answer the questions. You will have to read the passage so that you get the main idea from it and the supporting details. Now, once you go through the entire passage carefully, you will know what the main idea is and what the supporting details are. The first thing to look for is the main idea. So for example, if you have this in front of you, there was a witch sitting on the wall. She was weeping and looking at her wrist all the time. The boy who saw her there had no idea that she was a witch. Now, what exactly are we talking about over here? What is the main idea? Well, you're definitely talking about a witch. So what's the main idea? That's the main idea. A witch was sitting on a wall. That's the main thing. What are the supporting details? Well, everything else that is mentioned are the supporting details. For example, she was weeping. She was looking at her wrist all the time. There was a boy there who saw her and had no idea she was a witch. All those are supporting details. But the main idea is that a witch was sitting on a wall. Now, when you're reading a passage like this, what you need to do is read it slowly, understand it by picturing it in your mind. Imagine the entire thing. Imagine a witch sitting on a wall. Imagine her crying. Imagine her looking at her wrist all the time. Now imagine a boy standing right there, looking at her crying and looking at her watch, or her wrist rather. It's not mentioned that there's a watch on her wrist. See, I'm letting my imagination go a little further and imagining that she's looking at her wrist because she's probably wearing a watch, a wristwatch, but it's not mentioned there. So let your imagination run wild. Imagine it. Once you picture the scene, you will understand it better. You should be able to read carefully, understand the text thoroughly, and have logical reasoning. You should be able to reason everything that is there. Begin by reading the text slowly, very slowly. You might say that you have time constraints and you have to finish that comprehension within a certain amount of time. Okay, then use your reading time for this. Read the text very slowly. Make use of the reading time for that. This will help you to get the main idea, because the first thing you need is the main idea. Then read the text a little faster the second time. So what are we doing here? You are going to read the text at least twice. No matter how good you may be at English, read the text at least twice. I'll tell you why. If you are reading a storybook, for example, there are some books that really fascinate us and we love the story so much that we tend to read that same story a second time and a third time. Now, I'm sure you will agree with me that the more you read it, the more you understand it. You may understand it very well the first time you read it, but you may have missed out certain details that you will get the second time you read it. And maybe when you read it the third time, you will suddenly find some more details that you never saw before. Right? I'm sure you agree with that. And hence, no matter how good you may be at English, please read the text at least twice. If you feel that you are not good in English, not good at comprehensions, then you can read the text more than twice, maybe thrice or 4 times or 5 times. Go ahead and just keep reading. But first, read the text slowly. Begin by reading it very slowly. After you read it the second time, or the third or the fourth, you will be able to make a mental note of the details. Now, the more you read it, the more details you will be able to grasp. As you read through the text a second time, underline the important sentences and words. There may be words that you do not understand. They may be new to you. What should you do? Underline them so that you can make a mental note of them and the important sentences. Find answers to the questions who, what, when, why, where. When you find answers to these questions, you would have mastered that little paragraph. If you visualize the passage, you will understand it better. Like I said, imagine it, picture it in your mind. Let it play in your mind like a movie. All right? The first and last paragraphs will give you a very good idea of the main theme. So read the first and last paragraph very carefully. The first sentence of each paragraph will give you an idea about the entire paragraph. So read the first sentence of each paragraph very carefully. All right? Read these parts more slowly and carefully. Make a mental note of all the details that are mentioned there. Take your time to understand the questions. At the end of the comprehension passage, you will find your questions. Now, don't be in a hurry to answer those questions. Read the question very carefully because it will be absolutely useless if you have understood the entire paragraph, but you don't take time to read the question carefully and then you make a mistake answering it. For example, there may be a question, who ate the cake? And you may not read it carefully and you may read it as why ate the cake or how ate the cake or something else, and then you will answer it in a totally incorrect manner. So read the question very carefully. That is very important. If you do not understand the questions, you cannot get the answer right, even if you understand the text very well. So the first step, of course, is to understand the text, the passage that is given to you. But it is equally important to understand each question at the end of that passage. Check what aspect of comprehension you need to improve and work hard at that in particular. What do I mean by this? You may think you have a problem with vocabulary. You may have a problem understanding words in the passages. So what should you do to improve that? Read more, pick up a book and read it. Not many people read books these days. They love watching videos, but it is a very good habit to read books. Pick up a book and read it. You will automatically improve your vocabulary, and with that, sentence structure, spelling, punctuation, so many other things with it. You might feel that you need to improve your concentration. Okay, then work hard at it. See that you block out all distractions. Learn to concentrate. Maybe you feel that you have the inability to read the text within the given time. Practice will help you. It will help you to increase your reading speed. So read more. The answer to everything is read more. The more you read, the better your English will be. Pick up a storybook, anything you enjoy, and read. You might feel that you have a weak memory, but that is really insignificant because you don't need to have a memory to answer a comprehension passage. The details are right in front of you. You just have to understand it. We are not testing your memory. We are only testing your ability to understand the language. That's all. So if you have a problem with vocabulary, concentration, inability to read the text within the given time, you can very well work on that. Read more. Read, read, read. I cannot emphasize that enough. You need to read. Improve your vocabulary so that you can do comprehensions better. Your understanding will definitely improve. Read more so that your reading speed increases. So here we go. Again, I would like to specify you have to read. Reading is the only thing that will help. Practice. Read, 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 read. Practice. The more you practice, the better you become. It's the same with everything in your life, isn't it? If you want to learn how to cook, you need to practice. You need to cook more and you will become good at it. You can't just become good at something overnight. If you want to learn carpentry, you've got to practice, and only with practice you will get better. The same goes with comprehension. You practice, you read, you practice, and you will definitely become better and better. You will master it. And now we're going to start with the comprehension passages that I have with me. So get ready to concentrate. Block out all distractions. Use a pen or your finger to go through the text. Try to read aloud. If that is not possible, maybe because you are in public right now, make lip movements as you read. It will help. So here's the first passage. Try to read it yourself. All right. So now the first thing you have to do is decide what the main idea is. What exactly are we talking about in the entire passage? What are we talking about? 3 bears. We are talking about 3 bears. That's the main theme. What are the supporting details? Everything else, what the bears did. Okay, but then you have to look through all the important facts that are mentioned. For example, where did the bears live? What did they do all morning? What were they looking for? Why did they stay close to the rocks? What was on the rocks? What were they doing there? Then you have to underline the words that you are not familiar with, which may be, say, basking, ravenous, perturbed, maybe, I'm sure everyone knows what swimming is, maybe eels, catfish, goldfish, anything that is new to you, any words that you have not heard before, underline them. And even I don't know meanings of all the words that I see, but I try to understand them depending on the way they are used in a sentence. That's what you will need to do. You cannot possibly know the meaning of every single word in any kind of text that you read. But you have to be able to understand the meaning by reading the entire passage, reading that particular sentence, and then you will know what it means automatically. Okay? So let's try this one. The first question: what did the bears look for all morning? Do you know the answer? The bears looked for catfish, goldfish, and eels. There were three things. Now, that is where the details come in. You have to remember the necessary details, right? The second one: what did the catfish search for? That's easy, isn't it? The catfish searched for snails. The third one: why did the bears stay close to the rocks? Now, if you have spent time reading this passage and understanding it, then you will know why the bear stayed close to the rocks. You cannot just find the word rocks. I have seen many students just looking for words in the passage and trying to, copy that sentence down as the answer. It doesn't work that way. You have to understand the passage. So if you look for the word rocks and you try to get that sentence as your answer, it's not going to help, because then your answer will be something like, they stayed close to the rocks where the snails lay comfortably basking in the sun. That does not answer the question. The question says, why did the bears stay close to the rocks? You have to answer it properly, like this. The bears stayed close to the rocks because the snails were there. They knew that the catfish would come looking for the snails and they could catch the catfish. So basically, the bears wanted to eat the catfish, right? And the catfish would come looking for the snails, and the snails were near the rocks, and so the bears had to stay near the rocks. Now, if you did not understand the entire passage, you will not be able to answer a question like this. So you have to understand it. The fourth one, you get questions like this sometimes, where you have to give the meaning of a word. For example, the word perturbed means. Now, I told you in the beginning that you should underline words in the passage that you are not familiar with, like perturbed, ravenous, okay? Basking. And by now you would have guessed what the meanings of all these words are, just by reading the passage, reading that sentence. So what do you think perturbed means? They were not perturbed. That means they were not concerned or not happy or not hungry. What do you think? Concerned is the answer. All right? And find a word in the passage that means very hungry. Now, you may not know what the word is, because there are words that you don't know, you're not familiar with. You don't know what they mean. But if you have underlined them in the beginning, okay, you will understand from the passage that the bears were hungry. They were looking for catfish. They wanted to eat catfish. Now, if they were hungry, where do you think you would find that adjective to describe the bears, that tell you that the bears were hungry? Where will you find that? Got it? The answer is ravenous, because you can see on the last line, splashes made by the ravenous bears. The bears were ravenous. They were hungry. Why? How do you know they were hungry? Because if they were not hungry, they would not have spent all morning swimming in the river and looking for catfish, goldfish, and eels. If they were not hungry, they would not have stayed close to the rocks where the snails lay comfortably. They were not eating snails. They were not looking for snails, but they stayed there because they knew that the catfish would come there to look for the snails, and then they would eat the catfish. So that shows us that they were very hungry. That's how you find meanings of words. All right. Now I have another passage for you, which is not as easy as the first one. So take your time and read it very slowly and carefully the first time. All right, now you should read it a second time, a little faster. Okay, so do you know what the main theme is? What is the main idea behind this passage? Harry's birthday. Okay, that's the main thing. And then apart from that, there are so many supporting details. There are so many people's names mentioned. Fred, George, Lupin, then there's Hagrid, and there's who else? Dudley. There are so many names mentioned there. So you should underline those names. Underline the names and any other important points and any words that you think you don't know, but you need to pay attention to, like honored, radiant, okay, maybe others, like maybe grinning might be new to you, or maybe smash may be new to you. And pay special attention to these words. If you read the sentence, you will know what that word means. Because by now you have read through the passage twice. You have got the main idea, you have got the supporting details, so you have understood it quite well. All you need to do now is to understand those words that you did not know. All right? If you're finding it difficult, read the passage one more time. Okay, and now I would like to read it for you as well. Harry's birthday, that's the main theme. Now, in this case, it was so easy. You did not have to struggle to get the main idea because there's a title, but you don't always get a title. By 7 o'clock, all the guests had arrived, led into the house by Fred and George, who had waited for them at the end of the lane. Hagrid had honored the occasion by wearing his best. Although Lupin smiled as he shook Harry's hand, Harry thought he looked rather unhappy. Tonks, beside him, looked simply radiant. "Happy birthday, Harry," she said, hugging him tightly. 17, eh? Said Hagrid. 6 years to the day since we met. Harry, do you remember it? Vaguely, said Harry, grinning up at him. Didn't you smash down the front door, giving Dudley a pig's tail, and tell me I was a wizard? All right, ready for the questions? Here's your first question. What time did the guests arrive? Now again, you cannot look at the word guess in the passage and say, okay, now I know what the answer is, and then just write by 7 o'clock all the guests had arrived. No, that's not the way you answer a question to a comprehension passage. You have to write your answer in proper English, even though you may not find it that way in the passage. Because the main thing here is for you to show that you have understood the passage. All right. So if you have understood the passage and you have imagined the scene in your mind, you know what's happening, you know, Harry's birthday and the guests are coming in and the guests, you can imagine the different guests with their names there and then answer. So what time did the guests arrive? You have to answer in proper English by saying the guests arrived at 7 o'clock. Or you can say the guests arrived by 7 o'clock. Full stop. All right, a capital letter and a full stop. Fine. And when you answer a question, use the past tense. In almost all cases, you have to use the past tense. So just use the past tense. So arrive will become arrived with a D. Your second question, who let the guests into the house? Now, again, if you just try to copy the answer down from the sentence that's there in the text, it will not work out for you. Because you can't say by 7 o'clock, all the guests had arrived, led into the house by Fred and George, who had waited for them at the end of the lane. That's not the right answer. You have to answer by saying, Fred and George led the guests into the house. Now, led is already in the past tense, so you don't have to change it further. You can use the word led again. The third question, where had Fred and George met the guests? Again, you cannot write something like this. By 7 o'clock, all the guests had arrived, led into the house by Fred and George, who had waited for them at the end of the lane. No, you have to say, Fred and George met the guests at the end of the lane. Okay? Again, there's past tense in the question, and so you don't have to change the tense. You use the word met in your answer. The next question, who looked sad? So now you will not find the word sad in the passage, but you will find another word that means sad. And again, you will not find any direct answer. But if you have understood the passage, then you will be able to answer this question. Who looked sad? Lupin looked sad. Your answer is so simple, so short, so sweet. Lupin looked sad. That's all. The next question, who looked radiant? Again, a very easy answer. Tonks looked radiant. Now, it is not correct for you to answer this way. Tonks beside him looked simply radiant. If I were your teacher and if you wrote something like this, I would mark it wrong. Tonks beside him looked simply radiant. You can't write that as your answer because that doesn't make sense. You're just copying the entire sentence from the passage and writing it as your answer. That shows that you don't really understand the passage. You have just looked for the word radiant and you found it in that sentence, and so you've written it down. It doesn't work like that. You have to understand and you have to write it in your own words. So your answer should be Tonks looked radiant. Now, even though your answer contains only 3 words, it is perfect and I would give you full marks for it. Tonks looked radiant. That's it. The next question, how old was Harry when Hagrid first met him? Now, for this, you need to do a bit of maths. Is your maths good? Let's see. So if you read that statement, he says, 17, said Hagrid, 6 years to the day since we met, which means they met 6 years back, 6 years before he was 17. So how old was Harry when Hagrid first met him? 11, right? So your answer should be Harry was 11 years old when Hagrid first met him. How old was Harry now? At the time when his birthday was celebrated, how old was he? Again, you cannot just copy it directly because you can't say 17, said Hagrid, 6 years to the day since we met. You'll get a big 0 for your answer. You have to say, Harry was 17 then. Why am I not saying now? Why am I saying then? Because if you learned the conversion of direct to indirect speech, then you should use then. Your next question. What had Hagrid told Harry the day they first met? So how are you going to answer this question? Are you going to copy that entire sentence? Didn't you smash down the front door, give Dudley a pig's tail and tell me I was a wizard? If any of my students had to write that, I would obviously mark it wrong. And I would ask that student if he or she thought I was a wizard. So how will you answer this? Hagrid told Harry that he was a wizard. So when you want to answer questions, you would have to have a good knowledge of the changes from direct to indirect speech, because sometimes you have passages like this that have direct speech in them. That's called direct speech, when someone's exact words are being mentioned. Now, when exact words are being mentioned, you can't just write those words down as they are. Like I told you, if someone had to write an answer, you know, for example, Hagrid told Harry, I was a wizard. Then I meaning, what are they talking about? Is the student saying that he is the wizard? Or is the student saying that I am the wizard? Confusing. So you have to be careful. Use the correct pronoun. It has to be changed to he or she or it maybe. Okay? The next question. Find a word in the passage that means not clearly. Now, if you have listened to me and understood the whole passage by reading it at least twice, if you have underlined important statements, if you have underlined the words that you think are confusing, that you have never heard of before, then I'm sure you will arrive at the right answer. The answer is vaguely. Now, how do you answer this question? Find a word in the passage that means not clearly. The word is vaguely. And when you write vaguely, put it in single inverted commas. The word is vaguely. What is the opposite of the word unhappy? Unhappy is in bold on the third line. What does unhappy mean, first of all? And then what is the opposite of that word? This is so easy. So unhappy means sad. So what's the opposite of the word unhappy? Happy, obviously. But if you don't say happy and you say ecstatic, overjoyed, you still get your marks. Any synonym, anything that means happy will give you your marks. All right? So when you're answering this question, you say the opposite of the word unhappy is, and write your answer, happy, and put it again in single inverted commas. In case you want all the answers, they're here in front of you on your screen. I hope you found this lesson useful. I hope you now understand exactly how to go about doing a comprehension passage. It's not about looking for words in the questions, looking for the same words in the passage, and then copying the exact same line down as your answer. Okay, that might help you once or twice if you're lucky, but in the long run, it's not going to help at all. So follow my tips and strategies if you really want to do well in your comprehensions and get the maximum marks. All right, we'll meet again very soon. Until then, do take care of yourselves. Bye.